And we are live on Facebook. Greetings and good morning to everyone joining us here for another New Jersey Constitution Republicans virtual conversation. It's my great honor and privilege today to have a man I've been wanting to have on for quite some time, Mr. Frank Pallotta. Thank you, Frank, for joining me.
No, thank you, JR, for having me. It's actually a privilege to be here with you. I've been following you for quite some time, so thank you.
Well, it's great to have you, Frank. And as we start the show, give us a little bit of a bio about yourself. A lot of us Southern New Jerseyans may not be as familiar with you as we should be, but there's a lot that we want to get to learn. So give us a brief bio.
Sure. Thank you again, JR. Well, I am a private sector candidate. I've spent about 30 years in the private sector, mostly in the financial services end. I stuck my toe into politics about 3 or 4 years ago. In local and then branching out from there. But really having the private sector background, particularly where we are now, JR, not just from Congressional District 5, but at the state, at the federal level, I think it's important to know the struggles of the private sector market and the operations of the private sector market. So I really do feel like I bring that to the table. In fact, I think our congressional leaders should have at least a half a decade or more of private sector experience under their belt. I left the private sector industry about 10 years ago or so, did a small New Jersey-based startup where I helped veterans who were struggling through the financial crisis. And it was my first real taste of trying to marry public and private sector solutions to come up with a solution that benefits all at very little cost to the private sector as well as the government. Again, that was my first taste. And from there is really when I had the bite to look at politics and to try and make a difference in my county, and that's really where I stood out. And again, having a private sector background, JR, I think is key, certainly in running for Congress, for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, and we can talk about this later, the way our founders put it, I mean, Congress is 2 years. Congress is 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off here and in DC for a very specific reason. You are supposed to reflect what is needed in your district back in DC. That's why you go back and forth. So the best way to reflect that is to be a part of your district, to work in your district, to know what's going on with the people in your district and to understand the industries. And that's what I do bring to the table. So that's really the background that I think has impressed a lot of the people who have supported me over the last few years. And that's what I want to continue to do.
And it's amazing that you bring up the fact that 2-year terms, of course, Article 1 of the Constitution talks about the Congress, House of Representatives, and Senate. That's by design. Article 1 is attributed to the Congress. And you, of course, are closest to the people as you go back and you're talking to them. And it's designed that way to be there's a lot of participation that's involved with the constituents and the representative. You're already aware of that, which sets you apart from your competition to begin with. And so it's very important for people to realize that you have this understanding immediately, which is so important because as constitutional Republicans, we believe in the structure of the Constitution as the best means in which to protect the natural rights of the citizens. People think, well, it's the Bill of Rights, the Bill of Rights, the Bill of Rights. And of course, the Bill of Rights is very important. But the Bill of Rights came as an afterthought because the structure of the Constitution, giving the Congress the first priority, and Frank, it was that way really until the founding of the country, till the progressive era, where Woodrow Wilson kind of demeaned representative government. The representatives, he's talked about corruption and all these different ideas, and there needed to be experts, there needed to be scientists and progressives in making decisions for the people. And you are an example of what the founders intended, properly representing the people of CD5.
Look, JR, I completely agree with you. And I think more and more people are beginning to understand that the Constitution itself is sacrosanct. I mean, it's not something that you should interpret depending on what the political winds and how they're shifting. We need to go back and figure that out. You know, I think they did a pretty good job over the last 243 years of making sure that, you know, what they put together in the Constitution that we followed for pretty much to what you said until the progressives got a hold of it and decided to interpret it a different way. We were the most powerful country in the world. We were the most respected country because we paid attention to what was true in the Constitution. And I think we need to get back to that. And when you really think about it, while it's a long document, it's pretty simple to read. And if you don't want to read the Constitution verbatim, read about what each of them mean, each of the articles, each of the paragraphs mean. And I think you'll begin to understand as you juxtapose it against what's going on right now, JR, that we are moving away from it and we need to move back. And I think we need people in Congress and in Washington that understand the country was founded on a group of basic principles that we have been moving away from. We need to get back to them. And I think once we start doing that, I think it'll both bring the left and the right together. But we'll see where that goes. We need more people who I think like you in Washington.
Well, I appreciate that, but we need representatives like yourself with the knowledge and the trust in the Constitution, realizing you're there to serve a period of time, and then you come back to your domestic life. But the Constitution continues on and on and on, and you've talked about interpreting the Constitution. How many have interpreted it incorrectly. And I would consider you really a reformer. When you get into Washington, you're going to be talking about the fact that in Article 2 and throughout the Constitution, we don't read anything about executive orders. And executive orders are essentially taking away the power that you would have as a representative.
Sure.
And that needs to be clearly defined on what an executive order is and place limits upon. We saw Joe Biden right away making all these executive orders, and they have the force they have the force of law, and that is your responsibility. All legislative power, the Constitution says, Article 1, all legislative power is given to the Congress, not to the president, not to the Supreme Court.
Right. Look, I read recently, all means all, period. Legislators legislate, the executive branch, JR, ensures that those laws and those rules are carried out, and the judicial branch does its job at administering what they need to do. It's not a group effort to legislate. It is the job of Congress to legislate. And I think people need to understand that. There are times, JR, where I wouldn't even say executive orders, but there are extenuating circumstances, less than a handful of the last 200 years, where we needed to look outside of the norm to bring either some stability or liquidity back into the markets. But you should not legislate through executive order, which is what Governor Murphy's done, which is what we're seeing Joe Biden done. And hopefully when we get Jack Ciattarelli in, who I know is a friend of yours, we'll begin to understand more. You have to stay in your lane. Our founders created the Constitution and those different branches to stay in your lane. And we need to get back and stay into the lane. You can't legislate by the winds and the whims of the political, machinations going on in this country.
That's right. And give me your thoughts on what you're hearing in DC with the proposal, this infrastructure proposal. And this is an example. This is an example just to give the people a little bit of background. The founders intended law to be simple enough for the common person to understand what that law was, because you have to be able to understand law, and the citizens need to process that. And that's why the founders were very, they didn't use a lot of vocabulary. They kept the proposition of law so that it was easily understood. Whereas now we have these 3,500 page monstrosities that nobody's able to read, but yet they're voting on it because the majority leader says you vote on it. So talk a little bit about the importance of legislating so that everyone can understand and common sense is used in creating legislation, which seems to be gone.
Jay, look, I'll take a quick step back and take a look at the person who's sitting in the office now, Josh Gottheimer. He's part of a problem solvers caucus, they call them bipartisan, a group of 40 or so. The problem solvers caucus should be the 435 members of Congress. Those should be your problem solvers. And it's that simple. If you've got to carve out a small group to solve problems, which to date have not solved any problems, that's the problem. We should get back to the drawing board on what we were supposed to do. You talk about the infrastructure bill. I'm all for making sure our infrastructure is there. In fact, I think that was one of our founders' intentions when it came to Congress, was roads and bridges and making sure that we have the ability to create interstate commerce. When you look at that, the Democrats are very good at calling things what they're not. Infrastructure's in there. About 3/4 of that bill, as we all know, special interest, pork, things that have nothing to do with infrastructure. And
Right.
I do believe infrastructure does involve the work that needs to be done from a technology standpoint, certainly where we are now. But my job when I get into Congress is to do that which is in the best interest of Congressional District 5. CD5 and its proximity to New York City means infrastructure is important. I wouldn't call it a bill as much as I would call it an investment. Coming from my background, investing in infrastructure is what you need to do, just like JR, you buy a house, you invest in a house so that one day you've got an asset that grows over time and that asset pays you back. That's what we're supposed to look at in an infrastructure bill. So when Josh Gottheimer, I guess in his bipartisan problem-solving way, loads up a bunch of other things that purely are special interest in pork, no wonder it begins to weigh on the people when they look at what folks do in Congress. People need to understand that particularly on the Democrat side, when they stand up and tell you, oh, this is an infrastructure bill, we need to help our infrastructure, they don't tell you how many dollars or what dollars go to infrastructure. So that is the one thing that I think the private sector brings to the table. You start BSing around what the real issues are and you're out the door. And in Congress, you're out the door with respect to the next election. But I think with the money and the special interest going around, you can play around with your messaging, which I think the Democrats do well. So to answer the question, I think one of the pressing issues for Congressional District 5 is infrastructure. We do have over 100 years of crumbling bridges and tunnels and roads that need to be addressed. But as a fiscal conservative, make sure our investment is about taking care of what we need. And the perfect example, when you look at an investment in buying a house, there's buying a house, and then there's buying a house and a boat, maybe a second car and a vacation, and lumping all of that into a purchase of a home. That's not it. Your investment is about that which you need to make your district better. And that's what I plan to do. And that's what I plan to do with the other 434 members of Congress, is to figure out how we get back on track to help the people that we were elected to serve, JR.
Outstanding. I think one thing or what you can implement, Frank, is the idea of one appropriation at a time. There's no question that we need to appropriate funding for infrastructure. Okay,
Sure.
So we appropriate money for bridge construction, bridge repairs, transit, repairing transit, our grid. Our electric grid is in dire need of attention, and but appropriate that money one appropriation at a time as far as the federal government and spending, and just make it clear this is what we're going to use. But to put all these other frivolous programs and the idea of pork and the continuing all these, as you say, these very special interest, sectarian type oriented appropriations, this is what bogs down the Congress. And this is why I think it's important. And I know you'll want to simplify it too. But let's have one appropriation at a time and vote on that. And then we're able to effectively appropriate the money where it needs to go for the specific reason that the bill mentions. The bill gives you the information of what you're appropriating. In this case, it's infrastructure, and infrastructure includes our grid, all of our means of transportation, our bridges, our roads, and that's it.
Yeah. Look, it's part of the game that the world of politics has evolved into over the last half century or so, is what can you do for me? And it should never be from a congressional leader standpoint, what can you do for me? What can I do for you? That's what this is all about. One of the things I tell you I'd like to do when we do have these bills, especially the bigger bills that are worth discussions, bring it back to the district. Let's talk about it. Let's have a roundtable. Let's have a forum. I don't want to tell you what I want to do. I want you to tell me what you want me to do. And if you think, and if we think through some sort of consensus that they like something, they don't like it, or they want to change it, we'll bring it up. I mean, honestly, Jared, it's the thing that bugs me the most about congressional leadership that we currently have here in CD5. It's his personal agenda. That's what he does.
Mhm.
He talks
Yep.
in Congressional District 5 to his constituents about what he thinks they want to hear. And then when he gets on his train and he goes down to DC and he sits with his leaders, his party leaders, he does completely different things. And it's very frustrating because then he'll come back and talk about, gee, you know, I tried to help and this is what I got over for you and this is what I did. But the truth is, he's not delivered one thing for our district in 5 years that he's promised, not one thing. And it's because of his inability to work as a problem solver, reach across the aisle. And when you vote 97% with Nancy Pelosi, and that was last year while Trump was still the president, he's probably up to 100 now with Joe Biden. I think his votes are 100. We have a problem. We have a problem when the person in our in congressional leadership is doing that which is in his own personal best interest. And that's what I want to stop, Jay.
Excellent. And of course, Frank, what you're describing is the progressive mentality that essentially began with intellects like Herbert Crowley, Frank Johnson Goodnow, Woodrow Wilson, who believed in the ideas of politics and administration. The politics is determining the will to do something for the people on their behalf without their participation through representative government, and then the administration of the will, determining the will, and then the administrative aspect that follows through with the will, realizes the will. And that administrative aspect, Frank, doesn't include the representative means of government. It's an agency that's created, and we could go on. I could show a picture of all of the different administrative agencies that unfortunately Congress has created. And what they've done is they have abrogated their own power to legislate to these administrative agencies. And the people in the administrative agencies, Frank, they're not elected.
Nope.
But Gottenheimer is a disciple of this idea of politics and administration. And politics and administration setting the will, then getting the administrative agency to do it, as opposed to the structure of the Constitution, whereas the powers are separated, offsetting one another, limiting one another. The balance of power, separation of those powers is with the Founders Institute. That's the Madisonian view, and that's what you believe. And that's why what you believe is much more effective than what Gottenheimer believes, who believes in this idea of politics and administration. And Frank, a lot of the people don't understand these ideas of politics and administration. That's why we come along, the Constitutional Republicans, to try to educate the people so that they're aware of this, and then to restore their restore representative government, which you will act for them. You are their representative in Washington. It's not your will. And Gottenheimer believes it's his will. It's not your will. It's what your constituents are telling you, and you're representing them in the nation's capital.
Yeah, JR, look, my entire private sector career was about doing what was in the best interest of my shareholders and my customers. When I moved into politics, my shareholders and customers were the voters. That's why this is such a natural move for me. It's not that tough to look somebody in the eye and say, what do you need? Or to sit back and look at the masses and say, this is the help I need to bring, during the crisis, our small businesses, during our health crisis that we just had. We know where people were hurting. The pandemic was real, but as we began to move away from it, Phil Murphy and Josh Gottheimer became drunk on this executive leadership that they were the be all end all. And we're still under executive order by this governor. And, it's one of the things that I really, really have issue with. Again, it comes down to, what do the people need to help themselves? And as I said, there are times where the government needs to help create a path so that the people can then find their way and find their way again. It's not the government's job to say, jump on my back and I will take care of you and I will be a cradle to grave solution for you. That's not what our founders intended. And, folks, like you said, Gottheimer, like the notion of being able to say, and let's face it, he was embedded for 25 plus years in DC, working for both Bill and Hillary Clinton. And I think he likes to fancy himself a Bill Clinton when he's really a Hillary. It's really about getting back to, JR, what you said, which is finding out what the people need. And those needs change every day and every week and month and quarter. And you're almost managing a company when you manage Congressional District 5. And there are times where, you've got to tweak a few things, and you've got to bring certain things to the table, bring infrastructure back, bring money back. You're going to run into crisis situations where you have to go off script. And when you spend your time in the district, going off the script becomes much easier because you're living it. I have a small business. I worked in large industry. I've worked even in my startup. I worked very closely with the government in bringing solutions to our veterans. So I know the quagmire that is the government. But when you put good minds and good people together, and you work for a solution that's best for your constituents, there's nothing that can stop a legislator if they have that in mind, JR. And you brought up something very interesting that I want to jump on. You brought up the notion of educating your base. And what I want to do is educate the base as to what our founders did is the best solution. And when you, as Democrats, when they rule and when they legislate by fear, people forget. And I want to do that in our primary last year. I think we were our campaign was one of 4 that were running in the primary. I was the one with the least political experience. I had a great team around me, and the difference we really made in the middle of a crisis, we educated our voters how to vote. Things were changing every day. And, my campaign manager and I sat down with our team and said, at this point, we're not going to tell people to vote for me. We're going to show them what their responsibilities are in voting, and we're going to tell them what we think is important. And JR, we walked away with a 20-point win in a field of 4. We took 42% in a primary from someone that nobody really knew 10 months earlier, because we educated the voters and we let them know, this is what we think is important. Tell us what you think is important. And every step of the way, we made the voters the boss. We listened to what they had to say. And I think that's important when we get into Congress, is to educate the voters again as to what our founders believe were important. And I think they did a pretty good job 250 years ago. So I'd go back to that again, JR.
Excellent. And as we were talking about this, it's important for the people to understand that the ideal of progressivism, what Crowley and Goodenow and Wilson, and today the Gottenheimers and the Phil Murphys and the Joe Bidens all believe that experts, trained experts, have to make the decisions for the people, because the people are incapable of doing it for themselves. As the founders trusted the people to make the decisions. And essentially progressivism took away the preeminence or the sovereignty of the people, and we the people. Now it's we the administration, and the administration is made up of experts who are committed to the ideas of progressivism. There's no room for any sort of deviance from the progressive mindset. And the other thing that's important to remember, Frank, is that the founders understood human nature. They understood the proclivity of human nature for self-aggrandizement or self-centeredness, or to get gain. And the progressives, they deny that there's human nature. John Dewey, one of their great philosophers, thought that people are just an open slate, and they can be engineered and they can be programmed how to think. And that, I think, has become very, very evident with the acquiescence of our citizens in allowing all of these abrogations of constitutional rights in the name of a public health crisis like the COVID-19 lockdowns. And this is we're seeing the whole manifestation of the progressive ideals of government and experts making decisions for the people. Walmart can stay open, but the local pizza shop, you can't. The liquor store is open, but the person who's got working in an automotive shop, no, you can't. But these people really believe that they are smart enough and elite enough and arrogant enough to make these decisions for the people.
And JR, when the people begin to stand up or question, the media comes in and they become censored. You all of a sudden become accused. I'll tell you what Josh Gottheimer does. Every time someone in his district challenges or questions what's going on, he immediately labels them as a racist and a white supremacist. That's what he does. They manage by fear. When it becomes an issue about, hey, it looks like we might want to open things up a little bit, and you start to see people take the constituents take a step forward. Now we've got the fear of a second lockdown. Now they start to talk about increase in hospitalizations. You know what they're doing. It's managing by fear instead of managing, through science. They were the ones yelling at Donald Trump. Listen to the science, listen to the science. They're not listening to their own words from only 12 months ago. And I think people are beginning to understand it, where they're masking our children, where they're threatening another lockdown, when we're looking at death and hospitalization rates as low as they've ever been. It's something that I think the people need to stand up and take notice. And hopefully we start to see this turn in 2021 with Jack Ciattarelli. We start to take in New Jersey some more Senate and Assembly seats back. And then you'll start to see the tide turning in this state and hopefully in this country, JR.
Right. And I put a statement out last night that really the restoration of our constitutional republic is going to start on the local school board, because the parents need to be involved with the school board. They have the greater interest of the child in mind as opposed to the state.
Yep.
And it's important for the parents to be getting on the school board, assuring that the curriculum is taught correctly, that they're the accurate view of history, an accurate view of our founding, an accurate view of our exceptionalism, especially regarding our founding documents, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution. So all of these things really begin at that school board level, and then they go up further to the state level, and then they go up, of course, to where you're going to go into the federal areas. So it's very important that we understand this hierarchy of where it starts. And of course, there's been a lot of backlash about teaching critical race theory and so forth, which I think is a positive thing. We started talking about cultural Marxism back in 2017 when we created the Constitutional Republicans, and people looked at me like I was from Mars. But now it's something that more people are aware of. And that's a good thing, because now people are getting educated and becoming made aware, but they also need to be made aware of progressivism, politics and administration, rule by experts, all the things that are prohibiting proper representative government in Washington.
Yeah, it's going back to school boards. I will tell you that there is no power greater than a mother fighting for her child. None. And when you look at certainly in my town where I'm growing up, you're seeing a lot more women step up and look at roles on the school boards, look at roles beyond the school board, because I think they're sick and tired of it. They're sick and tired. They understand more than any group the value of making sure that their family is protected. I'm adamant about making sure my constituents are protected, the Constitution is protected. It's a perfect marriage. So you are starting to see, as big as any movement I've seen recently, is moms stepping up and taking charge. It's their children that are being taught. And you're even seeing unaffiliated and some soft Democrats saying, I'm not really liking what I'm seeing coming out of these CRT discussions. And if there's one thing more powerful than politics with suburban moms, it's their children. It's the livelihood of their families and their children. So I'm happy that we're starting to see them step up, and I want to be there. I think it's something that we stumbled on over the course of the last 6 or 8 months, and it's very intentional by the Democrat Party to continue to step earlier and earlier and earlier into the education process. People throw the word indoctrination around a lot. It really is. You and I, Jerry, we've been around a while, so we've seen the pendulum swing from Watergate to Jimmy Carter, and then when we didn't like what was going on with our choppers burning in the desert, we went to a Ronald Reagan, then we went to a Clinton. And the way these progressives, I think, will try and stop that pendulum and keep the pendulum to the left, so to speak, is by catching our children early, indoctrinating them early, so they don't have the ability to think about historically what's in their best interest or their family's best interest. And it's up to us to let children learn. History is important. We learn from history. And our progressive push is not about doing that. It's about indoctrinating our children into thinking the way they want to think. And that's got to be stopped, JR.
There's no question about it. And I'd like to discuss with you some of the objectives that really need to be changed as far as the way Congress conducts itself. And number one would be the idea of top-down leadership. Everything revolves around the party leader now. Of course, Kevin McCarthy is the leader in the Congress. and
Sure.
everybody has to be on board. We're in an age of tremendous polarization.
Right.
And everything is determined by the leadership, whereas the founders would have repudiated that idea. They would have thought that Frank Pallotta and Jeffrey Van Drew and Chris Smith would all be considered equally in representing their specific constituents, because they understood the changes in geographical demographics,
Yep.
the unique situations that occur up in Hudson County or Essex County, Sussex County, compared to what happens in Cumberland or in Salem County or in Cape May County. This was the brilliance of that representative system based upon geography and the constituents. But that has been completely, now it's become so narrowed to where everything revolves around what the leadership wants, as opposed to what Frank wants in properly representing his people. Do you think that that's something that you can make inroads in, getting to DC and winning next year?
You know what? I think the answer is yes, JR. And yeah, I've met with Leader McCarthy a few times, and I know that he understands, a couple things. Clearly, we want the House back. And, the NRCC is singularly focused on making sure that we get the House back. And the way we do that is by having people who represent the district run against people who are not on Kevin McCarthy's team or not Republicans. And it's a tough road. If, for example, you're Kevin McCarthy and you say, I want you to do what I want to do, but those issues are not in the best interest of the district. So our conversations have been great. He knows this district enough to know that the issues of Southern New Jersey are different than the issues of Bergen County, which is bordering on New York City, where you have a lot of people who understand the financial industry, they deal with the infrastructure. And he's very open to making sure that we're in a position where we don't just flip the House in 2022, but we take it with enough of a margin that we begin to wake up the country. And that's where we are. So Chairman Emmer and Kevin McCarthy, I think, are in a position to have us come to them to say, this is what we're doing and this is what we're thinking. When we speak to those guys, they talk. The first thing out of their mouth is what's going on in your district. And I love that. I love the fact that they're asking that, because, if we walked in and they said, hey, let me tell you what we want to do, might not be something that I'd be interested in. They are very interested in making sure we flip the House, we get the country back on track, and that each representative represents their district. So when they come back to DC, it becomes an open dialogue over how we maintain the House, how we grow bigger in the House as we move into 22 and 24 and 26. So there's a desire, I believe, with the Republican Party in Washington, that when we begin to take the House back, and we start to take it back with greater margins over the next few years, we stick to conservative, principled Republican values, because that's what people will gravitate toward. When people finally get the taste again of being able to be in control of their own destiny, I think it'll force the Democrats to rethink this progressive agenda of the last 2 decades. And that's what we want to do. And I think that's where leadership is, JR.
And another aspect that would need to be restored, the founders, of course, thought this was very, very important, was the deliberation. Now, you and I are old enough to remember when C-SPAN started, and I'm sure you were as interested in the proceedings that occurred on the floor of the House or in the Senate chamber when it came to debate. And we've seen that marginally become marginalized. We don't see it except for emergencies where somebody will, a representative will get up and make a point, and there's nobody there, there's nobody listening. It should be required that all the representatives should be there together and they're deliberating law. This, of course, we see this throughout our history, that this occurred in the Congress and the Senate with full chambers, full quorum, and the legislators are debating right from wrong, and they're exercising what the founders understood as an Aristotelian objective of looking for and searching for the good. Why is this law good? There has to be a goodness. There has to be an essential good to what is being proposed legislatively. This has been completely forgotten, Frank. Nobody's deliberating, nobody's debating. It's all, we know how we're going to vote. They can predict how the vote's going to go down. We're not trying to convince anyone of our point anymore. And I think that this is a very, very important aspect that needs to be restored, the deliberative process within the Congress.
Yeah. Look, we talked about it before, JR. Most of the conversations I want to have about bills and where we move things forward have to happen in my district. You know, I think you finalize when you get to DC. I want my people, my constituents, the voters to say to me, this is important to me, Frank. And the way you do that is you get out every single day and you make sure that they understand who you are. And when you go down to Warren and Sussex, you're talking about grids and infrastructure. There are parts of Warren County that have no internet access, not spotty. They have zero, they have none. That needs to be addressed. There are portions of Bergen County where Josh Gottheimer will go to and visit on a regular basis, and then very strong Republican districts, he won't step foot in. He manages by what he thinks he needs to manage to win the numbers. That's it. And you know, it's something that again, JR, I feel very strongly about is it's the people's house. You go down there and you're supposed to execute with the people you want. So I do want to make sure that we have an open forum. It's something new. I want to bring to the table, you know, the ability to have these discussions about what's important. You go to Warren and you talk about the aspects of the infrastructure bill that I think are key to them, and you get their interest. You talk to small business owners there. You talk to the moms that have their kids in school. You talk to the larger business owners that travel around the country and they see how their business is affected in different parts, who may say to me, look, Frank, I like the way things are running here, but every time I go to Kansas, I run into some hurdles with regard to my business based in New Jersey. What's my job? My job is when I get back to Washington is talk to those Kansas legislators and say, hey, what is it that's not working for my district that maybe we should have a conversation with? It gets back to my thought here. The Problem Solvers Caucus is all 435 people working together. And that's what we need to do. And I think once people get a taste of that, JR, they get a taste of their legislators working for them again, you'll start to see the approval rating for Congress jump up above 30% again, which is where it is now. And it's almost silly that it's that low, but I understand it.
Yes, it is a tragedy that the poll numbers on Congress are so low amongst the people. And this is because of the non-delegation doctrine and all the things, all the issues we're bringing up as faults with the Congress, and they need to restore their ability to provide that structure, that foundation, the structure of the Constitution, as the first article gives them. And of course, you're closest to the people. You're there 2 years. And another thing that's unfortunate is that you have to continue to get reelected. Immediately after you win, Frank, you're on the campaign trail again, as opposed to actually deliberating down in DC, talking to your constituents, getting what your input from the constituents. And this is an unnecessary, and of course, the amount of money that is spent in running a campaign. It's really, it's sad that it's become that, and the founders would frown upon some of the unnecessary burdens that someone who wants to be a representative has to incur in wanting to be a representative. So there's so many things that need to be restored in making the Congress effective again. Yeah,
look, running for office, and I'm sure you know this, it's about money, the message, and the messenger. And all three have to work together. You know, there's probably an algorithm out there that applies, you know, a number or some numerical value to each of them. And our campaign has the right message. I believe I'm the right messenger. Clearly, you know, money becomes a factor, but when you're a Josh Gottheimer and you're referred to by everybody in the world as the human fundraising machine, you don't have to legislate properly. You don't have to have a great message. You don't even have to be a good messenger. It becomes so skewed when you have so much money that he forgets how to legislate, and he doesn't care. And you know, we will raise what we have to raise to get to the point we need to get. But what I'm going to bring back to the table, which is something that Marge Rockema and early Scott Garrett brought to the table, was Scott brought fiscal responsibility to this district. Marge Ronkema was a person everyone knew, everybody understood, and everyone knew that when she went to DC, she represented them. I want to bring back a little of both of those. Our district was in Republican hands, JR, for 84 years before Josh Gottheimer decided that slander and lies and name calling would be what he would do to try and change people's minds. And, you know, someone like a Scott Garrett, who was a principled man, he's a man of God. I don't think he thought that Josh Gottheimer would launch the attacks that he did and continues to do today. I can't tell you how many times I hear, you know, people tell me, well, gee, you know, he called you a white supremacist, and he called you a racist, and he called you a fraudster. And he said that you defrauded veterans and old people out of money during the housing crisis. Quite the opposite. And I think he knows it. My startup helped veterans, more than 10,000 veterans who were struggling through the crisis. And my campaign manager said to me very early in the campaign last year, why don't you lead with that? Why don't you come out and say that? The veterans don't raise their hand and say, I'm going to help you. They put their head down and they serve their country. That's what I did. I did what I thought was in the best interest of my veterans. And, you know, I think people will begin to understand that, JR, when they see our campaign and where we're running, that we have the right message and we are the right messenger here.
Right. And of course, it's important for the people to realize that Josh Gottheimer is a product of Bill and Hillary Clinton. Bill and Hillary Clinton got their political acumen, if you will, from Saul Alinsky in the Chicago School of demonizing, name calling, everything that can be done to distract, essentially calling your opponent what you really are, accusing your opponent of what you're guilty of already. And of course, this is the Clinton or Alinsky playbook that you have to deal with, and it's important for the people to understand who continue to vote for the Josh Gottheimers and the Hillary Clintons is that. And this is very, very evident with the Democratic Party, that they're only interested in supporting their constituents and their special interest groups and those people that put them in power. Whereas the great distinction amongst Republicans is we believed in the Lacanian principle of liberty to all, and that we're representing all Americans. Abraham Lincoln still believed during the Civil War, as he was waging war against the Confederacy, he still believed that he was president of the United States and the Confederacy. And he was still representing those in the South by waging war against an insurrectionist, rebellious movement that was bound on expanding and preserving slavery. So, and this is in our very nature. The Republican nature is to represent everyone indiscriminately and equally, whereas the Democrats are all about special interests, public-private unions, special interest, sectarian. Now it's based upon race, it's based upon sex, it's based upon disability, and on it goes. And this is what we have to clearly define as Republicans, is that we're interested, Frank Pallotta, you will represent all of the people of CD5, whereas right now, Josh Gottheimer only cares about the people who put him in office. And that's roughly what, 54% of the people there, roughly saying. So this is why it's so important that we get our Republican message out. And you're aware of that initial Republican Party message, which was representing all of the people, not just some of the people.
Right. And you know, JR, it's interesting in the last month or so, Josh Gottheimer is being attacked both from the left and the right. The right is obvious why he's being attacked. You know, the man doesn't have a physical bone in his body. But the NRCC came in and they launched an ad attack on him. Club for Growth launched an attack ad on him specifically, not the Democrat Party, on Josh, on what he's doing. I think part of that was based on how well we did last year, how well our campaign did. Josh Gottheimer's on the ropes. Had there not been a pandemic, had there not been a mandatory vote by mail, I think the results would have been entirely different. But keep in mind, Josh Gottheimer knows that. And Josh Gottheimer was an executive with a firm called Burson Marsteller. Burson Marsteller is plain and simple a public relations firm that specializes in the spin. Burson Marsteller was hired by Saudi Arabia after September 11th. Why? Because they needed an image change. So Josh Gottheimer, I think, and his team spend more time worrying about how they're going to spin his negative image than how they're going to help the district. And that's a very, very key metric that I think we need to keep an eye on. And, you know, hopefully we get to a point in this race. Again, we're a little more than a year out. Josh Gottheimer cannot win a marathon. He cannot. He doesn't have the ability. He doesn't have the fortitude to stand up for a year and be able to refute what this campaign has been saying for the last year. We're out of a pandemic now. People are not going to be paying attention to as much time putting food on their table. Who's dying? What's going on with our veterans? What's going on with our elderly? So they're going to start to listen to the message. I think that scares Josh, and I hope that the Republican leaders in our district understand there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity in 7. We have an opportunity in 5, in a couple of other districts that we need to fight. And we need to fight these guys. And sometimes, you know, schoolyard bullies need to get a punch in the nose. I think the Dems need a punch in the nose to understand that we mean business, and principled conservative values isn't about sitting back and letting you know that we're the best. We need to show you why. Principled Republican values will move our country forward, JR, and I'm about to do that.
Well, I love to hear it. You're waxing eloquent. I certainly appreciate it. But you know, what's interesting, Frank, is to think about the progressives' objective was to take away the representative aspect from government, or in the Congress rather, and they essentially believed that it was people like Josh Gottheimer that were the problem. They were very, very sectarian. They were interested in special interests. They were more interested in self-aggrandizement and taking care of oneself. So the very progressive that Josh Gottheimer is what the forebears of progressivism wanted to eliminate, and yet it's thriving better than ever with someone like Josh Gottheimer. I find that quite ironic.
Yeah, no, it's look, that's what he's about. They're worried only about their position in government and the next steps. They're not worried about today's steps. When I get in, and I know I've heard Jack Ciattarelli say the same thing, my cornerstone will be CD5, period. It is the only thing I want to do. It's the only thing I want to do when I get to Washington. Josh is looking at CD5 as a stepping stone, and everybody knows it. That's what his war chest is all about. He travels all around the country doing fundraisers for a very specific reason. Very little of his money comes from the district. He has a lot of money that comes in. It's Washington, D.C., it's California, it's special interest. It's not the people in his district. They figured him out, but he's got enough money now that he can basically snub his nose to them, JR, and that's what he's been doing, and I'm going to plan to stop that.
And of course, Frank, as we move on, you're obviously very, very passionate about our veterans, those who serve, and the Constitution Republicans are as well. And what we have suggested is the importance of restoring the Congress's responsibility in declaring war. And we haven't had a constitutionally authorized declaration of war since 1942. And of course, that was amidst our participation in the European theater against the Axis powers.
Sure.
And so what has happened is that what we believe is that the founders intended the declaration of war to come from first the House of Representatives, because you know the actual men and the women who would be drafted or who
exactly
would volunteer to put, and what essentially they are doing, they are abrogating, they are forfeiting their natural rights. They are saying that we will put our lives on the line, and they have the natural right of life. They have the natural right of liberty, and to be able to pursue their own happiness as they create their own happiness. And that is all put aside in order to represent our country and to defend our Constitution and to defend America. And that needs to be considered much more carefully than has been since 1942, where all of these unilateral movements have been made, these directives, these orders by the executive branch in getting us into the Korean War, which Eisenhower was smart enough to get us out of, then getting us into Vietnam, getting us into a Desert Storm, getting us into Iraq, and then unfortunately what has happened in Afghanistan.
Sure.
And what we do as Constitution Republicans, we like to look back to the very beginning, to the genesis, to the impetus behind what created the situation. And this is why it's so important that Congress restores the authority to declare war, to debate whether war is the right way to go, because because the objective of the representative, and I know you get this, but the rest of the representatives need to know we are asking these men and women to forfeit their natural rights.
Yeah.
And it is our duty in government to protect and to secure their
Yeah.
natural rights. That means we can't put them in any situation where they may be killed unless it is absolutely imperative. And the words of George Washington should be ringing in the ears of every representative. He was the father of our country. He sets the example. He said, the Constitution is the document I will never abandon, he said. And what he would do is, and what was said is that he would want the representative government to not ask to put the men and women in our armed services in danger unless they were going to be taken care of, that the deliberation was done to substantiate why we need to go to war. And I'm not talking about calling COVID-19 a war or the Great Depression a war or this war on terror or war on drugs. I'm talking about real, actual war, which I believe needs to be delineated, or which needs to be defined legislatively.
Right.
But the idea is that Lincoln or Washington said, Frank, beware of foreign entanglements. Don't get involved. Be neutral and free with everyone. And that really should be the impetus guiding our foreign policy. But I think we need to bring back the idea of protecting the natural rights of those we ask to go into military service to begin with. Not just after they serve, but before they serve.
No, you're right. And it was the point you made earlier. I represent the 5th. 434 people represent their districts. If we come together as a group and we think that is the best thing to do, you can look a mom in the eye or a dad in the eye whose son is being sent to war and saying, I'm doing what I think is in the best interest of us. And again, it's one of the reasons you and I are talking, and I follow you, so closely, is we need to get back to the intentions of what the Constitution told us. We need to get back to our Bill of Rights, what our founders intended, what got us here, what made us the greatest country the world has ever known. And we're forgetting that. And I think we do need to get it. And if we go much longer, people will look at the Constitution as, oh, that thing that used to be. It's not a thing that used to be. It's a thing that is. And we should get back to what is. And people need to follow that. And look, there are people that look and follow the Bible. And they look to the Word of God. And you know what? I think we need to look at our Constitution the same way, JR. They got it right. And again, we're on the world stage, notwithstanding, some of the goofiness going on in the White House right now. We're revered in the world. I wish we were more revered. After what happened in Afghanistan, I think people are beginning to question it. Our founders built something, it's a republic if we can keep it. It's up to us. It's passed down. And we know a number of presidents have made that comment that, Ronald Reagan most notably, we have to protect those freedoms every day. We have to protect that Constitution every day. And I intend to let people know that's my only job, JR, is to make sure that I go there to represent them. And the thing that I bring down with me when I go down there is the Constitution. And we talk about it. And if there's an issue and my constituents don't believe that I'm the right guy, then we'll have that discussion. I think the best gauge of how you're doing happens in the voting booth. And my view is, people need to understand what our legislators are supposed to do. And it's not special interests and it's not just party leaders.
And Frank, what's amazing is that all the great work that the founders did in creating our Constitution, what the progressives and the Josh Gottenheimers will say, well, George Washington owned slaves, or Thomas Jefferson owned slaves. And that immediately wipes anything that they may have done that was virtuous or good from the conversation. And this is the ridiculous, this is the lack of intellectual rigor that people who support the Josh Gottenheimers are involved with. Whereas you're actually talking about, what good these men did. And they, incidentally, as we know the history, they did everything they could to stop the expansion of slavery with the North West Ordinance in 1787. So And this conveniently, Josh Gottenheimer won't talk about that. And people like him, progressives like him, they only talk about the history that serves their agenda or their political expedience rather
Right.
than actual truth and history. But
Yeah.
Frank, what I wanted to do before we wind up, we've had a
Mhm.
great conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, but I wanted to show the people your outstanding website that's put together here. And I wanted to go into some of the issues
Sure.
very briefly that you identify. And we're talking about our jobs and our economy. And we've talked about that. I mean, think about what a good and proper infrastructure bill would do for
Hmm.
our construction businesses up in CD5 and through North Jersey that needs a tremendous amount of infrastructure work. So there you go. We've already discussed that. Now I want to discuss Israel. And you're an ardent supporter of the state of Israel.
Hmm.
And you wrote a very, very important position paper that people can, I believe it's right here. You have a link
Yeah.
to it. And I printed it out and I thoroughly enjoyed the read, read more. And let me just bring this up here. But Frank, discuss with us, there it is right there. Discuss with us the impetus behind this paper that you wrote and why you consider supporting the state of Israel as being so essential in
Sure.
Washington.
Well, look, I don't think it should be lost on anyone that they are our greatest ally, probably not just in the Middle East, but in the world. We
Mhm.
share a lot of common values with them, and
Mhm.
where we've seen, certainly with the squad and this political correctness of what you can and can't say, we've moved away. We've moved away from our greatest ally in the region, and we need those allies in the region, like Israel. And what I've noticed over the last probably decade is it's not in many liberals and Democrats' best interest to come out against Israel. So they found ways, JR, to come out against Israel without coming out against Israel. And the thing that I bring up most notably in this paper is this concept of BDS. And it's very important to understand that you can attack a country a lot of different ways. Certainly Israel has had to deal, for many, many, many years with missiles and bombs and attacks. BDS and other economic sanctions and globally people getting behind this is another attack on Israel. And it's something that having a capital markets background, I understand. A bomb can be devastating, a missile can be devastating, but when you work to take Israel off the pages of being able to provide economic freedom to themselves, when they take them off of the global trade arena, you can affect Israel for generations. And we're seeing moves by Josh as well. Josh is silent on some of these things, where I think it's important to understand that countries like Israel, who don't just look to protect themselves, but they look to protect freedom around the world. They do that with us. That's our greatest link with them. And when Josh Gottenheimer, when we saw Hamas launching missiles a number of months ago, Josh Gottenheimer called for calm on both sides. It burns me up that he was calling for calm on both sides. Call it, Josh Gottheimer, what it is. They're attacking Israel. They're attacking their Israel's right to be a country, the right to live. They wake up every single day wanting to destroy Israel. And it's one of these things that I just don't understand why everyone in Congress doesn't stand up and say they are our greatest ally and we will stand behind them. The squad opens their mouth, and the progressives who don't want to lose the respect and the following of some of their other party leaders will stand in line. And it's something that I'm pretty adamant about, is making sure that Israel has the right to free trade, they have the right to protection, and they will know that as a congressman, I will stand behind them 100%. And I'll be very vocal about where we stand behind them, JR.
Well, you can definitely hear the passion in your voice, and I think it's quite admirable, and I agree. Of course, our Hebrew Old Testament makes up a large portion of our Bible, which we consider to be so important, and the very word of God and the law of God. It's very important. And I thought it was very interesting. You know, we've always wondered why many Jewish people are progressive, or why they vote Democrat. And I thought Ben Shapiro put it together best. Of course, he's a practicing Jew. He believed that many of these Jews who don't support Israel, who vote Democrats, are secular Jews. They don't believe in the Old Testament.
Right.
And I think that's quite remarkable. After reading the Old Testament, all of the information of there and how that's there, and how God identified with this specific people, whom he made a people out of one man, Abram, who became Abraham. Plural. And the history, and of course, Christ would come through the loins of Abraham and of Israel. And this is why it's so important for us to, and you say something very, very true, in that they are the only representative democracy, if you will, within that entire area that's dominated by essentially totalitarian regimes. And this is why it is so important to respect the fact that, you know, even the nation of Israel becoming a nation again was a miracle back in 1948, May 14th. And, and there's tremendous spiritual significance to that, to the recreation of the nation of Israel. And it has to do with biblical prophecy. And we can clearly read that throughout the three Gospels: Matthew 21, or Matthew 24, Luke 20, or Matthew 20. Yes, Matthew 24, Luke chapter 21, and Mark verse 13. But I think that's outstanding, and I would encourage the people to print out your paper on the position paper, and I commend you for taking such a bold stance and being an ally of the nation of Israel. Let's talk about the Second Amendment, Frank. And of course, I know you've got our brother William Bill Hyden up there. I know he's on your ear all the time about the Second Amendment, and rightfully so. And of course, we've seen incremental abrogations to Second Amendment rights, and they're always geared toward, Frank, the law-abiding gun owner. This is why we try to get the impetus. We constitutional Republicans, we say get the impetus off of the gun and get it on the criminal.
Absolutely.
Restore retributive justice, and make it penal for someone to use a firearm illegally.
Yeah, look, we're the only thing that gun and anti-gun owners agree on is we need to figure out how to stop gun violence. I'm a fan. Everybody's a fan. You don't do it by attacking good gun owners or by attacking the guns. You do it by addressing the issues. I mean, stack them up in whatever order you want. God in the classroom, family values. You know, there's a lot of mental illness is the biggest issue. That's what we need to address. So it just becomes a very simple solution when especially now with what we've seen since, since this crisis, the increase in crime that we've seen in Portland, in Chicago, and other states in our country, it's more important than ever, the right to bear arms and the right to protect yourself and your family. So that's something I'm a firm and ardent believer in, JR.
That's right. And then what is so very important to restoring the initial principles of the Republican Party, and one of the reasons why the New Jersey Constitutional Republicans were founded, was as the initial Republicans got together to stop the expansion of slavery into the Western territories and eventually its extinction and its elimination with the Republican 13th Amendment and the 14th Amendment giving due process, and the 15th Amendment giving the freed slaves the right to vote. We believe in taking that high moral ground that the initial Republicans did, that today the Republican Party needs to take the high moral ground in defending the right to life, the inviolability of the life of the child within its mother's womb from conception.
Yeah, it's becoming easier to be a pro-life candidate these days, mostly because of where the left has gone. The left has taken, when you're looking at second and third term abortions, you're looking at, and it pains me to even say this, they're looking at post-birth abortions. That's not an abortion, that's murder. That's murder, and people need to understand that. So, JR, it's something that I was recently at New Jersey Right to Life event about a week and a half ago. And
Yes.
the room was packed. The room was packed. Everybody understood, that life does begin at conception, and protecting those lives. And there are even, you and I can have a discussion over another hour about some of the solutions I think we need to bring to the table to have people understand the choice should be life. And it's very simple.
Yes.
There's a lot of other things that we can talk about, JR, as to why people have these issues. But the first choice should always be life. And that's where I think people will begin to understand that everything else kind of falls in line when you choose life first. And that's where I stand. That's where I'll always stand, JR.
That's right. And it's institutionalized in our very first founding document, the Declaration of Independence. The founders look towards the laws of nature and nature's God, entitling them in becoming the United States. And the first unalienable God-given right is the right of life. And to say the science clearly points in this direction, it supports what we believe in and life beginning at conception. And it's just something that needs to be done. The constitutional rights need to be given to those awaiting their birth, as they were given to the freed slaves, as they were given to young workers, and workers giving rights in Lochner v. New York, and rights being given to Native Americans through the U.S. Grant Administration in 1876, recognizing indigenous peoples, and giving women the right to vote. All of these different, at one time persecuted entities given constitutional rights. The last one that needs to be given that right is the human being awaiting their birth.
Yeah.
And it's just common sense, and hopefully that's going to get done soon. And of course, and I wanted to ask your opinion. I know we're running over, but we're having such a great conversation. But I wanted to ask you, Frank, and I want to have you back again too, to continue this discussion. But I wanted to ask your opinion. Of course, we know about the corporate tax cut, which is probably primarily the greatest accomplishment the previous administration and the Republican Congress. And what is your thinking on the SALT, the lack of SALT deductions? Now, initially, that was to only be applicable to people who are making a lot more money in a high tax bracket, but really it affected people that were more in the middle class tax bracket, which I thought was very unfortunate. So, what would be your correction? What would be your ideas on making that more fair legislation, not just helping corporate America at the expense of middle class America?
Well, there's a couple of steps we know that Josh has been talking about eliminating SALT for 5 years, and he's 0 for 5 years. And a lot of that has to do with his approach. He's not a smart man. He doesn't understand that he's got to sit with 434 of his brethren. He's got to sit with 100 senators, and he's got to sit with the executive branch and come up with a solution that is best for the country, while understanding that this is best for his district. SALT needs to be addressed. SALT is a burden on the middle class. These SALT caps are a burden on the middle class. They're not just a burden on the 1%. Josh should figure out, and we've already figured it out, there's something that needs to be done with SALT. It's probably a combination of raising the SALT cap significantly, if not eliminating it altogether. But you have to understand, part of the Trump tax plan from 2017 with respect to SALT and some of the other triggers, there were other triggers that went along with it. The SALT was capped at $10,000, but the standard deduction was also doubled from $12,000 to $24,000. There was an adjustment to the alternative minimum tax. So you can't just say, and Josh should understand this, you don't just eliminate the cap. You've got to rework the entire solution. You've got to come back and say, here's my overall plan. And we'll throw it out there. If we're going to raise the SALT cap from 10 to 20,000, we're also going to do these 3 things. And all these things together have to help our middle class. Like, Josh doesn't really understand. He tries to kowtow to the elite, and he tells people he's helping everyone. He's really not. And the more he throws solutions out there that have no following, year after year after year, people in New Jersey are paying higher and higher and higher taxes. We're the highest property tax state, one of the highest income tax states, we're the highest exodus state. People are leaving this state in droves. 3 years in a row, we're the highest exodus state. So clearly something is not being done, and a lot of it has to do with our tax situation. Josh is doing nothing to find compromise to address SALT, to address property tax, and address income taxes. So the plan really is to sit down at the table with the people who will effectively look to put the plan together to hit those triggers and find the right formula. And it goes back to, I hate to say it, private sector financial services background. That's what the financial sector has done for the last 100 years, is come up with solutions on how to move and readjust capital so that the people are in a better position. That's what we need to do with SALT. And this no salt, no dice is another thing he pulled out of this Burston Marsteller background. Come up with some fancy sounding solution, and then he's going to stand his ground. And we know what happened, JR, when Josh stood his ground a few weeks back with Nancy Pelosi, when he said, we are not voting for that $3.5 trillion package until we get the $1.2 trillion infrastructure package done. And then what Nancy Pelosi turned around and said, there, little guy, we're not doing that. You are going to sign the infrastructure bill and you're going to like it. And he did. So everything that he said he would try and do for his constituents, when he went back to DC, he was smacked down and he was told to get in line. And then he started to make the excuse of, gee, I really tried. You know what? When a football or a baseball manager tries to win and year after year after year after year they lose, it's time to move them on. It's time to move Josh Gottheimer on. He's not been able to deliver anything that he's promised.
And very true, Frank. And people need to realize that it's to the benefit of the Democrats to keep people poor. It's this vicious circle that occurs. And now we see, and I like to talk about, and you're well aware of this, I like to show the similarities between the Civil War era, pre-Civil War era, and the era that we're in now. And of course, we have a tremendous division and polarization, but we also see the Democrats going back to their roots and identifying and incorporating many of the same policies that the slave power that made up the Democratic Party in the South was indicative at that time. And that is to keep people oppressed economically with policies that take away their ability to expand, their ability to engage in economic mobility, and keeping the people poor is to the best self-interest of the Democratic Party. And people need to realize that to break this vicious cycle, especially in our urban areas. It's time to get back to the free market principles and the middle class principles of the Republican Party that have been there since our founding.
Yeah. It's simple. One of the examples, I'll be real quick with this. Vaccination rates across Josh's district are disproportionately higher in the predominantly white areas of his district. In the minority areas of Josh Gottheimer's district, I think the vaccination rates are somewhere in the low 20%. If you cared about the people in your district, you would make sure that you were in a position to get them vaccinated if they needed it. I'm a medical freedom guy. I got my vaccine. I got it for the reasons that I thought were in my best interest. Josh Gottheimer needs to spend time going back to these communities that he thinks he has locked and basically do what is in their best interest. It is not in Josh's best interest to go to these communities. It's in his best interest, like you said, to make sure across his entire district that they need him. He wants to be needed. And the party has done a terrible job at helping lift everyone out on their own. You can't lift people out through government assistance. You can help them find their way through government assistance, but ultimately you don't find prosperity in any region, in any state, in any country, unless the people are empowered themselves to take advantage of this great country and everything this country has to offer, JR. And Josh is not doing that because it is in his best interest to keep those communities down. And that's not going to happen with me.
Well, I'll tell you, Frank, I certainly hope that Mr. Gottheimer watches the program today, because he'll get an education in political science I don't think he ever received in his undergraduate education. I certainly hope it'll tune in, because he'll learn a lot from you. and hopefully the constitutional Republicans. But I want to encourage the people to go to www.pallottaforcongress.com and check out this website, join the team. This has been an outstanding conversation, Frank. I think we could talk for another week. But of course,
I may come down to your house. I
would love to have you come. We would love to have you come. I've got a couple of greyhounds. We can watch them run around in circles and be amazed by their speed, and maybe even have a few beverages as well and a cigar. So I would love to have you down, Frank, but we definitely want to have you back on again, because I thought this is a very enlightening conversation. And that's what
I loved it.
You talked about early on the importance of education, and you're committed to that. And we're educating our voters, you're educating your constituents, and that's precisely what the founders intended a representative to do.
Yeah, look, it's important. I mean, that's how we move forward as a country. Again, creating the opportunity for people to do what they believe is in the best interest of themselves and their families, and giving them the tools they need. You know, education takes on a lot of different, can take on a lot of different images and fronts. And, if it's school, if it's college, that's great. If it's a trade school, that's great. If it's moving into the family business, that's great. But educating your voter, educating your constituents about what it is that would be in their best interest to help move them forward. JR, it's what our country was founded on. It really was. When our guys decided to, pick up their muskets and rise up against what they believe was a totalitarian government across the pond, it was an act of treason back then. And we've begun to understand, people forget that, it's not easy. It's not easy to maintain a republic. It's not easy to do what Republicans try to do, which is go out and promote these principled values. It's getting easier. I think people are understanding, coming out of 2 years of a lockdown and totalitarian governor, that they've had it. They've had enough. But I'm about making sure that we use our Constitution to empower the people, so that the people are then able to run this country. And that's where I am. It's where I'll always be, JR.
Well, it's been an outstanding conversation. One of my favorite virtual conversations, and we've done about 60 or more. But I want to, as we wind down, Frank, I want you to give me your opinion of these words that I like to end our broadcast with. And I believe that if we, as Republicans, reincorporate these words and these ideals, that we will speak to the greater majority of voters. We will resonate with a greater number of voters, and Republicans will win elections. And that is, and this is a quote, "All this is not the result of an accident. It has a philosophical cause. Without the Constitution and the Union, we could not have attained the result. But even these are not the primary cause of our great prosperity. There's something there's something back of these, entwining itself more closely about the human heart. And that something is the principle of liberty to all. The principle that clears the path for all. It gives hope to all, and by consequence, enterprise and industry to all." And that was, unquote, said by Abraham Lincoln in his fragment on the Constitution. And that is why our motto is liberty to all. And that gives us the hope and the ability to have enterprise, to create work, to make ourselves self-sufficient, not relying on government, and allowing the government to do their sole responsibility in securing our rights.
Yeah. Look, for 200 years, that's been the mantra. I think people, when they woke up in the morning, when they were at work, when they were with their families, they understood from the moment they opened their eyes, we're in the greatest country in the world, and that it was a battle every single day, both here and abroad, that you have to fight for that. It was ingrained in us. We knew that if there was something we needed to do, whether at the municipal, at the state, or at the federal level, we fought for it. We debated it. We understand. We looked at what was right. Like we said, our congressmen debated amongst themselves about what was best for the 435. It's grown over years to 435 districts here. We've lost that. And I think what people are starting to, I hope they're starting to realize, is we've got to get back to basics. It's such a cliche phrase, but those basics are what founded this country. And we have to get back to exactly what you said. We need the government to lay a groundwork for us, the citizens, to be able to prosper and be able to move forward and provide for our family. And once you understand, the government just helps to provide the path and the framework, and they're there as a safety net in the event of an emergency. And those emergencies you can count on one hand over the last 200 years. That's where we need to be. That's what we need to understand. So it's going to be the job of our campaign. And I know you're starting to see people like Rand Paul, who, I think a lot of people didn't pay him much regard 4 or 5 years ago. He's been the only guy that's been right. He's been the only guy that's come out, and people are listening to what he said a while ago about the vaccines, about the deficit, about what you and I talked about earlier, about when and how you declare war. He's right. He's somebody who lives and breathes the Constitution, JR, and it's so refreshing to come on this show and to talk to you and to follow you on Facebook. And I just think this is where our country hopefully is going to start turning. They're going to look back to the Bible. They're going to look back to our Constitution. We're going to look within ourselves. We're going to look to our heart to find the opportunity to do what's best for us and our families. And I want to be part of that, JR, and I want to be part of that with you.
Well, I'm certainly thrilled with this conversation and getting to talk to you in depth, Frank. And just let me accentuate one thing that I wrote, or one phrase that, of course, Lincoln said that this was everything we're describing with the creation of our country and our Constitution and Declaration. He firmly believed that there was no accident. He was by no means a Darwinian, and we know that Darwin really is the father of the idea of progressivism and the living Constitution evolving and so forth. But Lincoln firmly believed that there was a purpose to the United States. And we've seen that throughout history. No nation in the world has done more good. No nation in the world has sent out more missionaries. No nation in the world has sent out more Bibles. And this was all part of the providential plan. And the founders understood that, and Lincoln clearly understood that.
Yeah.
But Frank, I can't tell you how I've enjoyed this conversation. I could go on all day. But I want you to remember that you need to keep it. I want you to make sure that you keep Kellyanne Hart under, control up there. I know she gets a little unruly once in a while, but make sure she stays in line and behaves herself. Will you?
Yeah. Now, you know what? We're not here without Kellyanne. She's the best. She's principled. She's smart. She's a tough cookie, and she yells at me at least once or twice every day.
Yeah. She's something else, and she's a very important part of your team. I know that, and I've seen that for a while. And give her my best.
I will, JR. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity again and again. Thank you so much, and I'll be back whenever you need, and I'll be down there for that cigar soon.
Well, that'd be great. And I'm going to come up there too as well, hopefully to do some stumping for you prior to your election. But great to talk to you, Frank.
Thank you so much, JR. I'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
All the best. Thank you. Have a good day. Thank you, everyone. Please like and share this video. Let everybody know about Frank Pallotta. He's the future of the Republican Party. Thank you.
Thank you.